Hi there. Welcome back to the Real Film Chronicles podcast. As always, I'm Nathan.
And I'm Brian.
And in this week's very special episode, we're going to be taking a look at a little film called No One Will Save You.
Fantastic. Looking forward to discussing this this movie. This latest digital release came out on Hulu, I believe.
Yes. Is Hulu part of Disney? Because it was released on Disney Plus and Hulu, or is Hulu the Canadian release?
Hulu is like the American streaming service that I think Disney purchased years ago. But in Canada, Hulu never came out. And instead, we have Disney Plus, and they added what they call Stars on it. So we get a lot of Hulu content on Stars, which can be a little surreal because I think in America, where most, like, that's its like headquarters, you would go into Disney Plus, and it's like it's all sanitized Disney, like family-friendly content.
Yeah.
Where here we log in and we see like Deadpool and rated R movies like in the superhero movie section, right? But yeah, a young woman who's been alienated from her community finds herself in a face-off against a host of extraterrestrial beings who threaten her future while forcing her to deal with her past. I mean, to say it threatens her future, I mean, yeah, like
What?
alien threat trying to get her. That's
Trying
put
to
in
either
a way.
assimilate or kill her. It's like, yeah, that's technically not wrong, but it feels like they're understating things a little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
It's not like they're like, oh, like the aliens are taking her job or something. It's like, no, they're,
Yeah.
like, they're coming down and like messing up her house and chasing her around in the middle of the night. It's like, yeah, it's a little bit more than just like impacting the future.
I mean, that'd be a different movie if the aliens just came down and just like messed with your stuff and just like cost you a bit of money, just like jeopardizing your financial future because you got to pay for all the damage.
Came down, they were just bad roommates. Who's going to pay for this hole in the wall?
Fantastic. This movie seemingly came out of nowhere. Like, it was not on my radar at all, but because it came out like digitally, I feel like there's less lead time to some of these digital releases.
Yeah.
And I've seen a lot of criticism online in regards of saying this should have received a theatrical release. Do you think this movie would have like done well at the theater? Or do you think it was just like straight to, home release a good idea?
It may have. I think from my own personal thoughts on the movie, this felt more like a video on demand release in terms of quality. I'm not sure. Like, the special effects were okay, but it wasn't like an epic science fiction adventure that you'd need to see on the big screen, like say The Creator. This is one of those ones where they would have gotten more buzz if it was on the big screen, but it's not a movie that necessarily would have benefited from being on the big screen.
I think it's one of those things where if it got a theatrical release, I probably would have went to see it because it's kind of, I mean, it's an original sci-fi horror-ish movie, and it's like, it would have been kind of a nice treat to see it there. But I agree, like the special effects and whatnot, this doesn't necessarily necessitate a big screen viewing experience. Instead of watching at home with a couple friends or family, it's like it was nice to do. That's kind of the opposite side of it all, is just being able to see like a new release like right away in that like nice like streaming format. The digital quality can be satisfying and a little safer on the budget, on the wallet right now than going out to the theater to see every single movie, which I think we both could succumb to pretty easily. But No One Will Save You. I mean, it's safe to say we'll talk about spoilers throughout the movie. If you haven't checked it out by now, do so. Stream it, Disney Plus, Hulu, wherever it is. It's a short 93 minutes long, which I love. I love 90-minute movies. Like, there's just, I don't know if that's like mandated by the studio or whoever. Maybe that's as much story as they had here. But to me, like, it felt like a pretty proper runtime. Because for what they did with the movie, if they did it any longer, like, it would just feel like it's a drag to get through, right? I mean,
You're asking the wrong person, Brian. I felt like that 90 minutes was probably 60 minutes too long.
Oh, really? Oh, geez. Because I was fully invested in this movie. Like, when it was going, I was like, my eyes were glued to the screen nonstop. I was just like, if I was keen to physically sit on the edge of my seat instead of just fully relaxed with my feet up, I'd be on the edge of my seat all the time. I was just like, I was really invested in what was happening, and I was anxious to see, like what was coming next type of thing.
I don't know. To be honest, this felt more from my point of view. I think we're going to have a bit of a diverging viewpoint here. This felt like a good concept for like a short film for like 30 minutes. And it felt like, to me, the concept felt stretched pretty thin over 90 minutes even.
At 40 minutes in, I think, you sent me a text message. I can't remember the exact message. I should have it up in front of me, but you said something like, I'm pretty sure 40 minutes in, it's like, I haven't heard anybody speak a line of dialogue yet, right?
The main character definitely hadn't spoken a word of dialogue. I was trying to think, had anybody said anything yet?
I think there's only like 2 or 3 lines in this movie, and one of them, she's heading into town, and she's like avoiding people, and she, I think it's the second time she heads into town, she almost gets hit by a car, and the guy in the car is just like, get off the street or something, right?
Yeah, I don't even know if I count that, like, it's background kind of dialogue.
It is.
But the only official dialogue, I think the main character says 5 words eventually.
Yeah.
In the movie. And, like, to me, that was a really interesting, I don't want to call it people have been calling it a gimmick, that there was no, there's especially 5 words of dialogue. Most of it was told through visual storytelling. I thought that was kind of it's not a gimmick to me. It was I say like a filmmaking approach.
Yeah.
And for me, that was one of the things I actually did appreciate about the movie was, here was this director / writer. I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he wrote and directed this.
Brian Duffield.
Right. And I think this is a great kind of throwback to that idea that, movies are primarily a visual medium, and to be able to tell a story primarily through visual aspects, I thought that was really cool, and leaning into that kind of approach of, of not having a whole bunch of dialogue or really any dialogue throughout the entire movie, and then telling that story just through the images on the screen. I got to give props where props are due. I thought that was a really, really neat approach, and something you don't see that often.
I think it's almost like a brave approach, because like, going back to the theater discussion, I think people would be uncomfortable watching this in the theater with like 50, 60 other people and realizing nobody has said a word. And it's just like, there's enough sound and whatnot going on. But sitting here talking about it on the podcast reminds me of one of our early episodes, Willy's Wonderland, where Nicolas Cage's character doesn't speak throughout the movie. It's not that he can't speak, it's that he doesn't. And because of that, there's a good portion of the movie that is like pure visual storytelling. And this one, it felt a little strange at first, because it's like the characters went to speak, but like they open their mouths and it's like, they just make like a little noise, and then like there's no need to talk. And that happened a few times, and I felt it was kind of weird, but
it was pushing the boundaries. Yeah, it gets kind of, there's some contrivances to keep people from talking at certain points, which, again, overall, I wasn't a huge fan of the movie, but for for that part of it, that approach, the artistic approach of having nobody speak, I thought it was really, you have to be really clever in coming up with kind of ways around that. And I think there were some contrivances, but I think overall they did a really good job of,
I think so,
getting that through. So like, even though I wasn't a huge fan of the movie overall, like that part of it, I actually did appreciate that part of it and that approach. So like, I would love to have seen that approach though taken by, I kept wondering what this movie would have been like in kind of more competent hands, like somebody like Denis Villeneuve or Chris Nolan. It's like, it's a really cool concept, really interesting, but
just going straight up to the A-list directors right there. Right?
Yeah, even talking about recent movies like The Creator, even what would this have been like directed by a Gareth Edwards, right? I think, yeah, there was a spark of a good idea there, but the implementation for me is kind of where this fell down.
Well, maybe possibly because this is Brian Duffield's second movie. He did Spontaneous back in 2020. I don't think you've seen it. I haven't seen it.
Have not, no.
And it's like, maybe this is like a sign, like this movie had a pretty sizable budget, about $22.5 million.
Speaking of which, where did that money go? It was not to the special effects, I will tell you that.
Okay. I mean, I didn't think the aliens looked bad by any means, but there was definitely a lot of CGI.
They did not look bad for something that came out like like 15, 20 years ago, they wouldn't have looked bad. You're correct.
Well, that's not what I'm saying at all, but I think they looked fine.
They did not.
But in terms of my original thought before was just like maybe in a few movies from now, like he's really cutting his teeth on some of these movies. And when we see him with a bigger budget and maybe like a more fleshed out story or whatever.
I don't want to.
We'll look back at something like this and be like, oh, here's like a bunch of things that we're seeing him do and like really being able to evolve later on, right? Like this is definitely an early work for this director.
This feels almost like a project for like a film class. Like it feels like raw like that. And I can appreciate that. This is like a stepping stone kind of movie where he's getting Brian Duffield's getting this big stepping stone in his career, and he's like, it's getting all kinds of buzz online now that it's been released. Didn't get a proper kind of advertising campaign that something that apparently this magnitude should have. But it just felt like, this felt like almost a student film for a film class, or it felt like it was a cool idea, but it was like almost like a first draft script. If it would have gone through a couple more drafts, polished it up, it would have been a lot better. Felt raw in that way, for good and ill. But yeah, no, I didn't. This film didn't connect with me specifically. I wasn't super impressed by it. But on the other hand, like you're saying, this is like, here's a unique concept, a unique sci-fi horror film, and I think it's good to, even though I didn't like it personally, I think it's important to promote this in a world of sequels and big budget superhero movies and rehashed nostalgia. I do appreciate seeing original ideas and original movies and original stories that you don't have to read 3 different novels, 20 different comics, and watch 5 separate movies to understand what's going on in this movie. I do appreciate that. I just think in terms of the overall execution, it was severely lacking. Wow. So I don't know, speaking of the script, I don't know if you saw being posted and passed around Twitter, there's like a supposed image of the actual of a page of the script. I think it's a scene where she is being suspended against the ceiling, right, by like the telekinesis, alien powers, or whatever it is. And the script page is just like, she can't move. Like it repeated like in full bold text, like all caps. And interspersed between that is like the actual direction, like for the character and like what is going on in the scene. But it's like the script itself looks like it would be an interesting read in terms of like building that anxiety. And it's like for the actors and everyone to like read that and like get a sense for that. I personally have not read any script from start to finish, but like if you've seen pages of it here and there, you see notes in the margins. It's like, oh, that looked like actually a pretty interesting way to present a script to your cast and crew and your actors, to be like, this is the feel that he's trying to get across, right? I mean, and I think because of that, like you might have a script with no dialogue. This thing could be like 4 or 5 pages long, but they might have managed to find a way to make it like 100+ pages or whatever it is, 90 pages of actual content there. The general rule when you have kind of a standard movie with dialogue is about a minute, about a page of text equals a minute of movie. So for something like this, you'd expect to see like a roughly 90 page script. But it is like, I think you brought up an interesting point in terms of writing. Screenwriting is an art form unto itself, because you have to essentially, in a very specific format, a very formalized format, get across, essentially like, film is a very visual medium. So to distill that down into words and just distill it down into not even like in a novelization where you can use like kind of flowery prose to describe things, but in a script, it's more practical and to the point, but there are still ways to be kind of creative and engaging in a script, and reading different scripts. You can see, it's a more straightforward form of writing, but it can still be engaging. So it would be an interesting practice, I think, for movie fans in general, but I think maybe for scriptwriters to see, or burgeoning scriptwriters to see like, oh, how would you pull out a movie with very little dialogue? Because we've seen movies with very little dialogue before. How do you pull that off in terms of scriptwriting and make that engaging on the page? I think that's fascinating. It'd be a fascinating read to see what this looked like on the page. Yeah.
How do you feel about our main actor here, Kaitlyn Dever? She's been in a few other movies. I'm not sure if I've seen too many of them. Booksmart, Ticket to Paradise, Bad Teacher. I mean, that was quite a while ago.
Oh, was she one of the two main leads in Booksmart?
That's a good question. I'm not certain. I don't. Maybe
because if she's one of the two leads, I'm gonna have to go back and watch that movie then. Because the character, I hated the character absolutely from start to finish. But the actor, she did an amazing job. Like, part of me thinks that, I don't know, like the director is like, oh, let's put together a film reel for this actor that he really liked. Because like she could take this and go like to showcase her acting. Like if she wanted to get another part, is like, yeah, this is an amazing showcase of her acting ability, 100%. The actor was great. The character, I hated the character from start to finish. But yeah,
hated. That's a strong reaction to the character here.
Sorry, I've been going about my reaction.
No, I'm asking questions about. I want to talk about the actor here, and one of the things I almost worry about, because it's like, oh, after 20 minutes, I realize what this movie is going to be like, and that it's going to be, we're following her, and I don't recognize her from any other roles. She looks really young. Like, I assume she's just getting started out.
It's refreshing.
I'm being proven wrong here. She has a pretty fleshed out filmography here. But I think she started pretty young, right? Like, she was in, was it J. Edgar Hoover here with Leo?
What? Really?
In 2011. She's in Ticket to Paradise in 2022. Dear Evan Hansen a couple years back.
Right, yeah. Okay.
So she's been in a lot of movies. But because maybe this is my own, focus on films, like I don't recognize her, and I see this movie is like focused on her. It's like back in the day, it would be a huge gamble for a studio or a movie to put on like an unknown actor, because when you put an actor in, and they're in every single scene, like it's from their perspective, they're in every single shot, that's a lot of pressure to put on someone. And I think here, she did a bang up job. She did really well.
Oh, 100%.
And it's just like, I hope that leads to more starring roles for her, because it would be good to see her in more things. It's like, yeah, like you said, it's almost like a highlight reel of different things that she can do on screen. It was pretty impressive, because there's a bit of action in there. And that's one of the criticisms I saw that stood out to me, where it's the same action scene repeated like 4 or 5 times, right? Because it's like, it's the house alien invasion where you're like, oh, is she going to go home alone on these aliens? It's like, sort of, but not really. But like, she gets multiple chances to do that, right?
Yeah.
Which is kind of funny, I thought.
Part of it was, it was a little bit repetitive. But yeah, no, in terms of like the actual acting, no, like I would watch anything with her in it now. Like you're saying, like now I'm actually curious. I want to go back and watch some of the movies that she was in to see some more of her stuff. Like she was to go through that 90 minutes. She had 5 words. Was it I'm sorry, Maud, I'm sorry. I remember that because there's only 5 words. Easy script to memorize.
And I think it's almost worth pointing out that's like the only dialogue was hers, and it was in like a fake reality.
Yeah.
That it wasn't in like our own.
It wasn't even
reality
technically
here, right?
spoken out loud. It was in her own head. Yeah. When she got infected with that Las Plagas alien parasite. It was like, as soon as I saw the alien parasites, it's like immediately RE4, Resident Evil 4, Las Plagas.
Yeah. Okay. Because you sent that message, I didn't see it till late at night. I was just like, what is he talking about? Las Plagas. And I totally forgot that scene where like this gnarly looking like alien creature is going to go in her mouth and be like, always goes in the mouth. You always have to swallow this thing. It's just completely nasty.
Always in the mouth. Come on, guys.
Always in the
There's got to be a better... Can't we have like a suppository system for alien abductions from now on?
Now, I believe that was in the movie Slither, where the little worm things would go in any orifice it could get into. But I think that was a great movie. If you haven't watched that,
I haven't.
James
but
Gunn.
That's James Gunn, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to go back. Wasn't Pam from The Office? Jenna. Wasn't she in that?
She was in that.
What's her last name? Jenna...
Elizabeth Banks was in there.
Jenna Fisher.
It was
Jenna
a loaded
Fisher.
cast. Yeah, Jenna Fisher.
Yeah, Nathan Fillion was in that too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know why I haven't watched. I have, like, I like his older, or his like original kind of smaller scale stuff. I have I'm pointing in the background. You can't see this, people listening, but I'm pointing in the background roughly to where Super is on my shelf. But like, I like James
roughly.
Roughly, I don't know.
There's only 1,600 movies behind you, and you're pointing in that general direction.
It's over here somewhere.
But in terms of like an alien invasion movie, I mean, we probably could have talked for like an hour if we prepped for this to like talk about our favorite alien invasion stuff. And this one,
oh yeah, for sure,
definitely offers like a bit of a different thing. And in terms of interpretation, like, because I don't know, I watched it with a couple friends. It was a little ambiguous. I think we each got a little something different out of like what the ending was. And I mean, for you, what happened at the end there? Because she's essentially throughout the movie trying to avoid being assimilated by these aliens, trying to avoid that mouth alien taking over her mind. It happens for momentarily, but it's like she escapes it, so we get a glimpse of it. But then she's like fully captured, and the aliens bring her up to the ship, because it's like you get the sense that they're taking over the whole planet. It's inevitable. But this person in particular is causing some issues. So you got to bring in management with the flying saucer, really just put out the big guns, bring her up into the ship, and like probe her mind to see what's going on, right?
Yeah, Kevin, we're having a problem in Sector 7. This girl just won't be assimilated. Can we get you down here on the floor here? I'm on my coffee break, sorry.
Right. And I think because the aliens were almost like generous, because when they put this thing inside you, it like puts you into one of your happy memories. And presumably you would like your conscious self would be in that memory all the time, and like just repeating and be like, oh, that's kind of nice. It's like some kind of living hell where you'd be in your worst memory.
It's kind of nice it's kind of nice to have a lobotomy as long as you have nice memories. Like, yeah, sure. Yeah, that's great. Ignorance is bliss, Brian. I 100% agree with you.
And then we find out because the aliens probe her mind and be like, why isn't she happy in her happy memory? It's because like all the like these horrible things happened. She accidentally killed her friend, who are like her best friend from childhood,
quote
right?
Unquote, accidentally, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was honestly a pretty gnarly scene. But it's like, oh, this person can't be in their happy memory because it's also tainted as one of their worst memories as well. And so they've already assimilated the townspeople who all hate her. And I think that was important to show earlier, because now they're all being super friendly. And I think the aliens were just like tried not to indoctrinate her, but they just let everyone else around her like live in her ideal world, which was kind of like this old fashioned kind of thing. So everyone's being friendly to her, and she just gets to live in her home, surrounded by friendly people. And that was kind of like her happy place. So the aliens, in my mind, I thought about this afterwards, where you have that Next Generation episode where it's like this barren planet. If they have that green space, just like this guy living with his wife, and it's just like this ideal bubble of life that this guy's maintaining. It's like the aliens are doing this for her. They're just like raising hell in the rest of the planet. But it's like, no. For people who can't be like this, we're going to put them into a nice little personal thing and just let them live out their life for whatever reason. I mean, that's what I took out of that whole thing. But it was like, why the aliens were doing this, it's never explained, and I imagine that might aggravate some people because sometimes we need a little more explanation for what's going on in our movies, and sometimes we don't. And it's like this one, I didn't really feel like it mattered too much. It was like they're aliens and they're enslaving us for whatever reason. It's just pretty standard, par for the course.
Yeah, what I made of I didn't make anything of the ending, because the ending to me was completely nonsensical, just like the motivations and plot for the rest of the movie. Like you're saying, I don't need everything to be explained 100%, but I need some kind of context to interpret. I needed some kind of meat in the sandwich, meat in the cinematic sandwich, and that was missing for me here. There was nothing really to grab onto. None of the motivations made any sense for the main character or the aliens. Like the aliens, they were obviously technologically advanced. They had these giant spaceships. They traveled, but then to communicate,
had lots of lights.
But then to communicate with the ship, the one alien started doing the YMCA and started doing like the hand signs to coordinate. It's like, you're telling me it's established they have psychic powers, telekinetic powers. Like, you're telling me they don't have like a communication device. You're telling me they can't communicate psychically. They literally have to like do a mating dance. Like all the aliens, like when they were doing their dramatic, when they were chasing through the house, they would do like, when she was, for instance, in terms of like nonsensical, like what these aliens were doing, when she was trapped behind the fridge door there, she was in between the fridge door and the cupboards there, and the alien was like kind of standing in front of her. You saw the toes first, and you saw the one hand come up and the other hand come up, and then the head come up over top. Like that does, this alien's hunting her down. the only way that makes sense is if he's doing that, if he knows if he's on camera and being filmed, he's doing it for dramatic effect. He's trying to scare her, but like, why? It's shown at any time he could use his psychic power just to like hold her in place.
Yeah.
Why the cat and mouse game? Like, you have these advanced powers, but then you don't use them, but then you do sometimes use them. None of that made sense. And then when the aliens finally brought her up on the ship, and you see the traumatic memory of like, oh, she had an argument with her best friend, it got out of hand, and her best friend pushed her, and she got back up and smashed her in the goddamn face with a rock.
Yeah.
Which is like, as our arguments go, which again, I thought it was gonna be like, oh, they were driving and she hit an icy patch and it was an accident. It's like, no, she's 100% responsible. It was manslaughter.
Yeah.
And it's like, it made me like the character even less. It's like, oh, you're getting mad at the townsfolk for disowning you. It's like, well, yeah, you straight up murdered their daughter. Sorry,
I don't think she was getting upset with the townsfolk.
Manslaughtered the daughter. But the aliens brought her up on the ship. Dude, looking at that, it's like, oh, she's got this trauma, but like, why not? They were shown to have, there's no qualms in killing people. There's no qualms in cloning people, which sometimes they would clone people for, again, no particular reason. But why let her live? Why not just clone her, or why not just disintegrate her? They can't assimilate her apparently because she's too strong-willed. Nothing about the ending makes sense. She goes down and she's like, oh, yeah, it kind of made sense. Where it's like, oh, it would have made sense if she was just like, oh, everyone's assimilated, but she's not, and she doesn't actually care because now she's not ostracized anymore. But then the whole stupid 1950s dancing scene, why would they be all living out her fantasy? Why would the aliens empower her specifically? Are you telling me that anybody who has any kind of trauma just can't be indoctrinated? So like, there's thousands, millions of people across the planet can't be indoctrinated. This seems like it's an ill thought out alien invasion from a supposedly more technologically advanced race than us. But nothing about that ending made any kind of sense, unless the only explanation that makes any kind of sense is if after she killed her friend, manslaughtered her friend, that she ended up in an insane asylum somewhere, or what do they call it now? A mental health facility, to use the parlance of our times. And this was going on in her head as a way for her to kind of deal with the trauma and the grief, because that's the only way this non-plot and these non-motivations make any kind of sense, is if it's in the head of a crazy, deranged person. Otherwise, none of the decisions the main character made, none of the decisions the aliens made a bit of sense. As soon as and that's one of the things that kept frustrating me, is like, just be consistent.
I think it's interesting that, like, not necessarily you in this particular case, but I think a lot of people would do the same thing, like trying to attribute human emotions and motivations to an alien species that may not be able to be explained, right? It's like when we humanize animals in the wild, like with human traits and whatnot, because it's like familiar to us. And I can totally understand going down that road. It's like, I honestly didn't even think that's like, oh, I know we don't know the alien motivations, like what they're trying to accomplish, and the movie doesn't really attempt to explain it to us. It's like, this is just a series of events that just kind of happen. And like, I was totally fine with that. It's like, I could draw my own conclusions, like fill in the gaps. I kind of enjoy doing that every so often. And it's just like, because here, like, I'm watching Invasion of the Body Snatchers recently, and it's like very explicitly stated, it's like these aliens are taking over almost, and they're selling the human race as like, well, this is your chance to kind of still be human, but there'll be no more conflict. Everyone will get along. This is the utopia that you guys always want. Mm-hmm. And it's like, humans push back. It's like, no, we can't live in a utopia. It's just like, they're like, that's a nice little like motivation going on for our humans, and like a reason for the aliens to take over, like at least that they can tell the humans. And here we get none of that. We don't know why they're doing it. We don't know how they're doing it. There's so many unexplained things going on, which for me worked out okay. I do agree. It's like, it would be nice if we got a little more lore surrounding it, a little more reasoning.
So I will let me respond. I don't need human motivations. It's entirely possible. It's even better from my point of view if I don't fully understand their reasoning and their logic, because it would make sense. If they're an alien race, they're going to have a different worldview. They're going to think about things differently. What I'm talking about is just their actions need to be at least internally consistent with some kind of goal, right? But if you look at their actions and what they were doing exactly what the script needed in terms of like, oh, scaring they need to scare the character. But beyond that, like beyond actually just like the movie or plot requirements, internally, if they thinking about them as if they were actual beings, none of their, from scene to scene, their actions they're not consistent in achieving any kind of goal, whether that's a goal from our perspective or from their perspective. But it just felt like it was just disjointed, right? It was like, oh, now there's going to be a big spider alien. Now there's going to be a smaller alien. And the giant spider alien is going to chase her and then stop chasing her. And she's going to stop and look around. It's like, oh, where did he go? Even though it was gaining on her. And then she goes to the front of the house and it comes over the house. It's like, oh, now it's going to chase her again. It's like, I don't know what they're trying to accomplish. I don't know. Like, it didn't make any sense except in the context of these aliens knew they were in a movie. They were like, had Deadpool-esque fourth wall breaking abilities. And they're just like, oh, we're going to scare the audience. That's the only way any of their actions could make sense. Or if it was in the brain of a crazy person, like I said, like, I don't know.
That would be a pretty disappointing finish if she just like woke up at the end of the movie and was like, oh, this is all, the whole thing was just in her head.
It'd be interesting. It'd be more interesting.
I wonder if that would also be classified as poor script writing because it falls into such a classic horrible trope.
At least it would be some script writing as opposed to the no script writing we got. Even if it was like somebody had pointed out online, and again, it's derivative, but if it was revealed like, oh, she was killing these aliens, and then it was revealed like, oh, she was killing the townsfolk or something. It's like, it's kind of stupid, but at least it would have something to sink my teeth into. Instead of this one's like, yeah, she had trauma, and then at the end she came to terms with the traumas because the aliens somehow spared her for no reason. I didn't get the sense of that. And then like nonsensical stuff like, oh, at least be internally consistent. First of all, they were taking over human beings with those little parasites they put in their mouth, but then they can just like create clones of people. It just looked like it was pretty easy. They just like beamed down.
Did they clone people? They
cloned her that one time. The whole scene where she gets cloned, and then her clone chases her, and then stabs her, and then she takes out the box cutter and kills her clone. And she's dying in her own arms.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Which is supposed to, which I
see.
Took
it's
as
interesting that that's like a complaint where it's like, oh, they can clone people, so why don't they clone everybody? But for me, I just shuffled it in my head where it's like cloning someone would probably be a lot more resource intensive than just throwing a parasite into their body, right? It's like ideally we want to take the most economical route of alien invasion. And it's like, that's just how I think about it. It's like, I didn't even consider this as an issue in the movie.
But it's just, again, it's a term of internal consistency, right? If their plot was like using these parasites to take them over, if they could just clone everybody right away, like why the cloning thing, like that whole cloning sequence just seemed completely tacked on and out of place. It's just like, this is what I'm talking about when it feels like this was a movie that was like a short film, 30 minutes that was padded out to 90 minutes. Like that whole clone side quest added nothing to the movie, really added nothing to the characters, and it just like it confused the plot and the lore that much more. It just made, again, it was a decision that made no sense within the context of the movie itself.
I guess so. I mean, I feel like you could apply that same criticism towards like almost every movie we watch to some degree.
You can't though. It's like, this is what I'm saying, is that it's not about whether I think it makes sense or not. It's about whether
it's to be.
No, I've explained this several times. It's about making sense. It's got to be contextually consistent, right? It's got to be internally consistent. I can live with. It's
so because they show them trying to put parasites in them, that means they are not allowed to clone people in addition.
But what I'm saying is, in terms of showing their motivations, first of all, it shows very clearly for 90% of the movie what they're trying to do is get these little spiders in people's throats. It's like, okay, I get it. That's clearly laid out. But then all of a sudden you're telling me you can just clone this person with this thing in their throats. Well, then why bother with the hassle? In this case, she can't be the only one, right? She out of the entire planet, and it looks like a planet-wide invasion.
Well, we don't see any other part of the Earth. We don't know how many times they have to do this, right?
Right. So again,
yeah,
this is another kind of
to throw it as a criticism when the movie is so like focused from her perspective. When it's like, I guess we could cut away to like a newscast to show what's going on.
They showed dozens of ships.
Yeah,
in their horizon. It's I think
who's to say that they aren't also cloning a whole bunch of people all over the world? I mean, we just don't know because it's from her perspective.
Again, internal consistency, right, in their goals. Why the cloning and those things and those like parasites?
I gave you an explanation that you could live with if you want,
right? But that wasn't there was no hint of that in the movie, right? So like I'm saying, if they gave a hint of that in the movie, if they gave something. You're just that's just wild speculation.
I don't think it's that wild. Give me a break here.
No, you're out of order. all I'm saying is that, listen, it's fun to wildly speculate, but in my mind, there has to be some kind of internal logic or internal consistency, even if it's or internal illogic, right? If the character behaves in an illogical way, I'm absolutely fine with that. If it makes sense for that character, right? If it's an internally consistent. But what I'm saying is their goals, alien or otherwise, they were just doing. They just seem to be doing random things. Whatever was like. Oh, I think it'd be cool to clone some guys. I think it'd be cool to stuff some stuff down their throat. I think it would be cool to have these giant spaceships that look like subwoofers. I thought it's just like. The screenwriter throwing a bunch of stuff on screen that he thinks looks cool without actually thinking about, how can I make this coherent and how can I tell a story? He obviously wanted to tell a story about trauma and forgiveness and kind of self-forgiveness and acceptance. And it just completely, it ended up like a mess on the page. I don't know what he was trying to say about trauma and acceptance and forgiveness. I know he wanted to say something based on the character's backstory. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. I still have no idea based on the context of the movie what he was trying to say about it. And I don't think there's so many wild interpretations out there, so many varied interpretations. I think not because he used ambiguity effectively, but because the movie was just a bunch of stuff. And so you can interpret it any way you want. You can interpret this as the second coming of Jesus Christ. It makes about as much sense as anything else, right? There's nothing in there to grab onto from my point of view anyway.
Mm-hmm. All right. Before we get into ratings, anything else you want to talk about the movie? Anything else that really irked you about it?
It didn't irk me. As I said, I'm glad that this movie's out there, and I'm reading comments online. I seem to be in the minority on this one. I really just like the main character there. Was it Bryn? Is that her name?
Yep.
Just the character didn't do anything. She just ran around. Like she ran around for an hour and a half, or really in her time, like 2 days, she was just running. And the character was just so passive. She never once, there was a hint. There was one hint. It's like, okay, she had like almost like the gearing up scene or the suiting up scene. It's like, oh, she lights all the candles. She's boiling water on the stove. She gets the box cutter. It's like, oh, she's getting together a plan. She's going to like booby trap the house or something. No, she just wants to boil some water. She throws the boiling water in the alien's face and doesn't seem to do anything. It seems to be unaffected by boiling water. It wouldn't, this is what I'm talking about. Something like that, if it was established earlier on, it's like, oh, these creatures are really susceptible to high temperatures. And they're like, oh, so she starts boiling water to take advantage of their weakness. Like she just starts boiling water just because?
Well, I mean, would you do any different? I mean, as a human, throwing boiling water in someone's face is going to really hurt. So if you're being approached by an alien that you know nothing about, well, I got boiling water as a resource here. Wouldn't I try that?
Right, but there's easier ways. Like she grabbed the scissors. She could have.
Like I'm not watching my own movie before to see if there's any hints on what the aliens are like susceptible to.
No, but based on the knowledge, she knows that they're susceptible to, for example, sharp objects. Why not start creating a homemade spear or like getting all? She's shown to be a chef, right? She likes to cook. Like, where's all the knives? Go get your butcher's knives and stuff. It's like so you can at least defend yourself. I get it for the first part, right? You're in that situation. Any of us would be scared, be running and hiding. It's like, yeah, but then it's like, oh, she starts to think and she just starts to collect her thoughts. It's like, go collect some weapons. I thought she was gonna set up some like Home Alone style traps. She can't even barricade a door properly. She puts up, she nails up a quilt. And that's supposed to like, barricade the door.
I'm not trying to disagree with you by saying, what? I mean, she did nail it shut, but the aliens just individually remove the nails through telekinesis.
It was a quilt.
Like, what are you going to do?
They don't have to remove the nails. They could have just like pushed it aside and like none of the things the character did. She's not stupid. She's shown to not be stupid. She's not like.
It sounds like she's pretty stupid.
This is the thing. It's internally inconsistent. It's like some scenes it's like shown as like, no, she's a regular person. She's gone through trauma. But in other scenes, she's like, this is like, she's just not doing things just to advance the plot or just running around screaming to advance the plot. I don't know. The character is just, I was getting so frustrated because she was so passive.
Yeah.
Everything happened to her. Even when she did manage to kill these aliens, it was because the aliens were acting stupid. Like the one alien, the spider alien, gets its foot caught in the car and breaks the gas tank, and then she lights it on fire. It's like, yeah, because the alien was an idiot who tried to go through the car instead of around the car to get her. I mean, it's just, it was so frustrating to watch. What could have been, it was a really cool concept, and even the poster looked really cool. I love that poster design of like her being like, I think, sucked up from the house and everything. So many cool ideas in there. I don't know. It was just ended up being a huge mess when they came together. I don't know. Yeah. I feel like I've been going on like, what do you love about this movie, Brian? Because I know
I'm not going to get into it really. Yeah, I mean, I really like the vibe of the movie. I've sort of talked about what I enjoy out of it. I just thought it was interesting.
Yeah.
It's an experiential movie. I don't think I personally don't need things to be like really literal and explained to me all the time. I'm not saying that's where you're coming from, but like I've explained things like as I'm watching the movie, I'm rationalizing stuff in my mind, and like I'm not smart enough to even think about that stuff. Like I just create my own explanations for the movie's shortcomings. I think is basically it, and I guess ignorance is bliss. I'm glad I don't have that level of analysis sometimes, where it's just like a movie could be really brought down for me like that. I thought for a vibe and like the experience of this, everything was going on screen. I really love what they were doing. I love the horror elements of it. There's a couple good jump scares. I liked seeing the little bits that we did of the aliens and trying to extrapolate what kind of society they're running. I'm thinking about what they're doing this for.
Right.
All that stuff. Like I love that the movie presents me with enough that gets my mind kind of going. Yeah, but
nice.
It's time for some ratings. We use the Letterboxd scale of rating, which is out of 5 stars with a possible like on top of that. And where do you land on this out of 5 stars?
I was generous and I rounded up to 2 out of 5 stars.
Wow. I thought this was a half-star movie for you again, honestly.
Well, I mean, it's a good contender for my bottom 5 list for 2023. In my mind, this was a little bit, I don't know, the hype was a little bit overblown on this one. I appreciate that it's a original sci-fi horror idea, but just the execution for me just fell completely flat. No, you don't put words in my mouth.
Honestly, I just listened for 20 minutes about how the movie failed at everything it tried to do.
Right. But I do.
That's my reaction. Like I'm thinking about bringing my score down as a response because it's just like, man, the movie really did suck at a lot of things.
You should I enjoyed
watching it
down based on somebody else's comments. But
that's what happens all the time. I go see if I didn't understand a movie, I go read other comments and be like, what did I miss out of this movie? Like, what did people pull into this? And be like, oh, they really like this. And I see negative ones, be like, oh man, maybe I should have been picking up on this stuff. You know, I watch those the pitch meetings there.
100%.
And be like, look at all these things that I missed in these films. Maybe this wasn't as good as I thought it was, for sure.
No.
It definitely plays a factor in afterwards. But like, for me, like when I was watching, it'd be like, whew, that was a fun movie to watch.
Yeah, what was your rating overall?
I gave it 4 stars.
Okay.
I ended up bumping up because I gave Talk to Me 4 stars as well. I was like, I can't. Talk to Me was a much better movie. I had to bump that one up in response, like after the fact, because it's like this one needs 4 stars because it's like I just really enjoyed watching it. I look forward to seeing it again.
Fair enough.
So it's like it got into the 4 banger.
Yeah, no, for me too. Like the part of it was like the Jaws effect, right? Where the less you see of the shark, the more menacing it becomes. Where this one, they kept showing the more they showed the aliens, and setting aside like the special effects weren't that great. Even setting that aside, like I think showing the aliens took away the mystique, and it just like there were some scenes that were intended to be scary that I was kind of like they were unintentionally funny to me, like when the aliens were doing their little dances, or when they'd squat down and do their little poses, their little yoga poses. I think this movie would have benefited a lot from the approach of showing as little as possible of the aliens and let them be this menacing presence. Let them be this menacing presence off screen, and I think this could potentially bumped it up at least a star for me. Just in the approach, I like the concept, even the character's background. I like. It could have been done well, but just the way that character just grated on me. Just all her decisions, and then showing her backstory is like it just made. I was like, I'm with the townspeople on this one. I'm glad they shunned her. 100% glad.
Right. So one thing we take a look at after we give our ratings, we want to talk about what the ratings are around the world. We use 3 different sites to sort of like see what the average are. I have to make you guess unless you already looked it up.
I did not.
Some of the averages. Awesome. Play along at home. No One Will Save You. First up, Rotten Tomatoes, 2 ratings, the critic rating. And they use a 0 to 100, like a percent scale. What do you think the critics' tomato meter is on this?
Critics, I don't know, let's say 81.
Wow, you're really close.
Oh,
82%.
Is it? Oh,
yeah, which is a pretty high rating for a film. The critic rating, sorry, not the critic, we just did the audience score. Yeah.
I don't know, based on the comments I've read, I'm gonna guess like an 85. It seemed people really like this one.
No, people were not liking this movie at all. 58%.
Oh, really?
Certified rotten.
Oh, really? I was really surprised because I went online afterwards. I was reading. I'll go to like Reddit amongst other places, but I found it like people in the places I went to anywhere were really digging this movie. I felt like I was in the minority in this one.
I find that's what happens. You go like I follow a bunch of people on Letterboxd. I respect. I try and follow a mix of people that I'll often disagree with, people I agree with. I want all the the
100%,
all the in betweens.
100%.
And it's like everyone on the site was just like, this movie is huge, like the hype, right?
Yeah.
Like reading about it afterwards, it was like, man, people were like really into this movie. And so much of the discussion was this deserved a theatrical release. I don't know if it did or not. I mean, I don't think it would do much more for me if I saw it in the theater.
Deserves got nothing to do with it, but I think if it had gotten a theatrical release, it would have gotten more advertising and more play. And I think, as I said, even though I didn't like it personally, I think it's important to promote, these, unique science fiction horror stories that aren't part of franchises and then things like that, and get word out about them. So it might have gotten more buzz if it had gotten a theatrical release, right? Whether or not it quote unquote deserved it or not, right?
A lot of people comparing it to the same kind of release that happened to Prey, where it's like that movie may have done really well at the theater, and it's like that movie deserved to be seen on the big screen. But
Prey, I agree with. Prey definitely should have had a theatrical release. Like that would have benefited in terms of like the visuals and everything. Yeah, 100%.
So No One Will Save You on IMDb. They use the 10-point rating. What do you think the average is there for its IMDb users?
Let's go 7.6.
Ooh, 6.4.
Oh,
yeah. And finally, Letterboxd, our platform of choice. What do you think the average is now? I think it's been watched in the maybe 2 weeks since it came out about 77,000 times.
Is that high or low on average for a new release like that?
Honestly, I don't know. I've never really looked at it too much. I just thought I'd throw that little note in there this time.
Now we're curious. I don't know. Let's go 3.2.
Spot on. Yeah, 3.2.
Oh, yeah. So that's pretty
looking
average.
At
I guess.
It's like looking at its distribution.
Right.
Very, very few 4.5 and 5-star ratings. It's like. Obviously, the top one is 3.5.
Yeah,
that's pretty much its average, 3 and 3.5. But it's like it has a big drop off. Sometimes you see like a lot of ratings up at the 5, and then maybe a whole bunch down below. So it's like people were pretty like this was I don't know, would somebody call it a mid movie? Like is
that what the kids are saying? This movie's mid.
I don't know. I'm trying to be hip right here. It's just like trying to be young.
BRB.
But I don't know. Like for me, 3.5 is like a really good movie these days.
Yeah, like the way I rate things, and that's what my rating comes down to. Like 3 for me is like an average movie. I know 2.5 is technically 2.5 out of 5 is technically average, but for me, like 3 is like around average. But 3.5 is like that's a really good movie, not a great movie, but like that's a really good movie that I'm going to go back and watch more than once. Right. It was interesting too because you could see a lot of the influences, like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. I think you talked about. Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I think you can see shades of that in there. Even something like Alien with like the face huggers and getting impregnated or infected with these parasites. I think you mentioned Slither. There are a lot of different alien invasion movies, or even like The Thing. I think that the idea of like any kind of like body replication, or you have the replicants. Huge. Like you could see the influence in from those movies, and I hope that was it Brian Duffy, that he keeps getting opportunities to make movies, and takes this as a step forward. I see, from my point of view, there's a lot of potential in there. There's a lot of cool ideas. I think it just needs a bit more polish in the execution.
And following up with your early criticism of the movie, I hope Brian Duffield is able to graduate from film school and is able to maybe get a few lessons on screenwriting after this, right?
Brian Duffield. I apologize. I think I said Brian Duffy. But yeah, I'll be there on graduation day when he graduates from film school. I'll be the first one in line to congratulate him. 100%.
Perfect.
Yes. No one will save you from 90 minutes of nonsense.
Yeah. Sounds like a hard pass to if you haven't seen the movie, don't bother at this point.
Oh, come on. Don't be like that, Brian.
And that's a wrap on another episode. As always, we appreciate you hanging out with us today and taking the time to listen to our podcast. We have a lot of fun putting these together and hope that you get some enjoyment out of them as well. You can find us online over at realfilmchronicles.com, where we have not just a repository of podcast episodes, but many of our written reviews as well. If you're up to it, you can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram as well. All the links should be within the show notes here. So until next time, take care of yourself and others, and be sure to enjoy your film journey.